What's up, guys? Bear with me a moment. Let's take my seat. Obviously, the first video that I watched, the only video I'm doing today. Obviously, a lot to talk about. We're talking about the England national team today. So, obviously, I did decide to watch the international friendly game yesterday against Senegal. And I'm actually wishing I hadn't chosen to watch that game because it was an absolute joke. I mean, the refereeing was bad, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse for the fact that we lost at the end of the day. We lost the game because we're shit. Simple as that. We were shit. Simple as that. I mean, obviously, a lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't be you shouldn't be too angry about the game. It was just a friendly. It wasn't a major game, but at the end of the day, I can't help but feel angry at knowing that England lost to a team that we lost to a team that we should be beating at the end of the day. We lost to Senegal, a team that we should be, but that we should be winning, that we should be beating. But I mean, obviously we had that Eliza ruled out, obviously for what was, I think it was obviously for a handball. But at the end of the day, when I look at the international team right now, it scares me because we're so far off the mark right now. As I said after the Andorra game on Saturday, we are so far off of the mark. We're so far off. We're so far off the level that we need to be at. We're nowhere near the level that we need. That we should be at. I just think it's ridiculous. It's shocking that we struggled against Andorra. We were beaten by Senegal. That shows the level. That really does show the level that England are at right now. And how bad it goes to show just how bad we actually are as a team right now. It goes to show that we're not that good. It goes to show that we are actually quite bad. If we're struggling against Andorra and losing against Senegal, there are some problems there. You know, I mean, I want to hope that by the time the next World Cup, and obviously the World Cup comes around next year, England will have made some sort of an improvement. But I honestly don't think we would have improved that much before, the start, obviously, before we start the new season. No, not before we start the new season, before we go into the World Cup next year. I think England are really going to struggle at the World Cup next year. I'm going to try and save my kind of full judgments until the World Cup comes around next year. I don't want to say anything, I don't want to criticise England too much. And we're still so far, we're still like a way off of the World Cup. The World Cup isn't until next year. And hopefully by then we will have made some level of improvement within that period of time. Hopefully we will be a lot better by then, but obviously it's very hard to say just how much we would have improved by then. I think we're all hoping that things would have obviously would have improved massively for us by then, but I guess no one really knows at the moment. It's hard to say that, it's hard to watch England at the moment because we're so flipping bad. We are absolutely, terrible. Which is what I would say. I don't think it's unfair to say that England are terrible right now and should be so much better. As I think we all know that we should be so much better. We all know that we shouldn't be, struggling against the likes of Andorra and losing to, Senegal. And then obviously, as I said, a lot of people say, oh, I shouldn't be so angry as it was only an international friendly. Yeah, it wasn't. At the end of the day, it was an international friendly that we should have won. We're losing to teams that we should be beating. And that we should be beating pretty comfortably. We were winning, and it's the fact that we were winning the game 1-0. They scored the equaliser, and I said Senegal would not get any equaliser, they did. And I had a funny feeling they were going to say they were going to score a second, they were going to score another goal in the second half. They did. I didn't think they would win the game 3-1 though. I honestly didn't. I don't think anyone would have predicted that result yesterday. England. I mean, how? You know, I can't believe I'm even saying that England lost 3-1 to Senegal. I'm just glad that this wasn't a major game of any sort, like a major World Cup game or whatever. That would have been even worse. When I look at the international team right now, we're not a World Cup winning team. I would say, looking at us right now, we are probably a round of 16 team at best, and that's putting and that's being fair. If I wanted to be incredibly harsh, I would say we wouldn't even make it past the group stages. But I want to try and but at the moment I think that we are at least around the 16 team at best. We're definitely not a World Cup winning team right now, that's for sure. Right now, looking at the England team right now, the England team right now wouldn't even make it past the semi-finals. Well, they wouldn't even make it past the quarterfinals probably. They would struggle to even get there. You know, I want to believe that Thomas Tuchel can do better with England than Gareth Southgate did, but at the moment, it's hard to have faith in the manager. It's hard to trust the players. It's hard to believe in the players and get behind them and support them and give them the backing that they deserve when they're struggling against the likes of Andorra and losing to Senegal. Why should we get behind the team but give our team our full backing when we're picking up such bad results and we played out? There's no denying that we played absolute garbage in both games. I actually think it's crazy that Senegal had more shots on target against us last night than what Andorra did on Saturday, and that was obviously a qualifying game. And Andorra didn't really have that many shots on target against the start in that game. Senegal, flipping it, I think, to be honest with you, I think I have completely underestimated Senegal and how bad they were. I used to say Senegal were crap, but I can't really say Senegal are absolutely garbage anymore when they've just beaten us 3-1. And the reason I'm so angry about this, is because it's embarrassing, to see England losing to teams like Senegal. It's really embarrassing to watch. You know, that was probably the most embarrassing England game I've watched since the Euros last year. You know, as I said, but it scares me, to see the fact that we're so far off the mark and we're nowhere near the level that we need to be at. We're so far off of that, so far off that, we're nowhere near being a World Cup winning team right now. You know, we are definitely, without a doubt, a round of 16 team at best. And hopefully, and as I said, hopefully by the time that summer rolls around, we will have improved, to a certain extent. But I don't think we will have, Um, I mean, as I said when I did my review for the World Cup qualifying game on Saturday, I said that I, as well as many other fans, want to go into the World Cup next year with a decent level of confidence. We want to be in forward to the World Cup next year. We want to be excited for it next year. We want to be. We want to have a reason to look forward to the World Cup. To look forward to the tournament next year. You know, we don't want to. Obviously, we don't want to have to go into that tournament absolutely shitting ourselves, which I feel we're going to. Because obviously we're so off the mark at the moment. We're nowhere near the level that we need to be at. I do think that we could definitely be better performance-wise. I I hate to be so critical of the of our team, but when we're losing to, in games like that against teams like Senegal and everything, it's hard not to be angry. Because it's so embarrassing to lose a game like that, to lose a game 3-1. I was disgusted by it. As an England fan, I was disgusted and appalled by that performance yesterday against Senegal. It was probably the worst performance I've seen since, as I said, since the Euros last year. I want to hope that things are going to go well for Thomas Tuchel. I don't want to sit here and think, oh, if things are going to go badly, we're going to, he's going to, Thomas Tuchel was going to do worse than what Gareth Southgate did. But at the moment, it's hard not to fear that. It's hard not to fear that Thomas Tuchel is going to do worse than what Southgate did. You know, I honestly, I feel like I want to believe, 100%. I want to believe that Thomas Tuchel is the manager that will win us a World Cup. But I honestly don't know. I am not very confident about that at all. You know, to be honest, I kind of felt more confident about Southgate than I do right now about Thomas Tuchel. Maybe, in a year's time, I'll be feeling a lot more confident. Maybe in a year's time, I'll be a lot more excited, and my opinion of the England national team will be a lot better. Maybe in a year's time, I might have a little bit more faith in the England team. But for now, I am worried and I'm scared, and I am scared because we're so far off the mark. We're so far off the level. We're so far off the level that we need to be at. We're nowhere near where we need to be. We're nowhere near where we should be at the end of the day. We're nowhere near. We're not on the level that we should be on. We're not the sort of team, and we're not at the level where we can beat teams like France or Portugal or Spain. We're not at the level on that level where we can actually give teams like that a good game. Right now, if we were to come up against one of those teams, we would get absolutely battered by any one of them because they're so much better than we are right now. At least teams like that will say that they've won a trophy in the last few years. We aren't. We're absolutely shit. We're continuing to get worse and worse and worse. We're not getting any better, we're getting worse and worse and worse, if that's even possible. I don't know if it is even possible, but it certainly is. It certainly feels possible. I'm stunned. Absolutely stunned, to be honest. I really don't know what to say. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video anyway. I'll see you for another one soon. Bye bye.